There will be times when you need to force a hard return in your copy, but you don't necessarily want to start a brand new paragraph or any other new element. In those instances, you're going to want to use a line break. Now, they're very easy to use, and we're going to demonstrate this using the breaks.htm file, which you can find in 03_04 in your exercise files directory. So with this page opened up in my code editor, if I preview it in my browser, I can see that down here at the very bottom, I have an address for lynda.com. It's at 6410 Via Real, Carpinteria, California, 93103. Well, that is actually where I'm at right now. It's a beautiful location. I highly recommend visiting Carpinteria. It's a gorgeous little town. But I would like to have is the name of the company, the street address, and then the city and state. I'd like to have them all on separate lines. If I go back into my code editor, so if I scroll down here to the bottom of the page, I can see that the address is contained in a single paragraph. Now, that's actually a really good thing because those elements belong together. They're all part of the same address. If to achieve my spacing goals, I put them in separate paragraphs, they would no longer be related to each other in any way. And semantically, it would be incorrect. So I need to keep them in the same paragraph because they're part of the same address. So to achieve my effect of having them each on a separate line, I'm going to use the line break character. I'm going to place my cursor just after lynda.com, and I'm going to use a line break tag, which is the BR tag. Now, earlier in the course, I mentioned that there are some elements that don't need closing tags. Line breaks are one of those. So whenever a line break is encountered in your code, your user agent knows to go ahead and put a hard return in and go down to the next line. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is right after the street address, 6410 Via Real, I'll go ahead and add one more line break. So if I save this and go back into my browser, I can see that now my address visually looks kind of the way that I want. lynda.com, the street address, and there's the city and state. Now, also notice that there's a good bit of difference visually in the way line breaks and paragraphs are formatted. Notice that paragraphs sort of have that extra space between them to sort of visually let you know that these are separate elements, whereas line breaks just do that hard return right back down to the next line, and you can force them anywhere that you want. Now, you're probably going to see these occasionally in other people's code. You might see them look like this, where they have the BR, a space, a /, and then the right angle bracket. Well, that's what's known as a self-closing tag. Back in the days when we were using XHTML, XML has some very interesting rules, and one of the rules of XML is that if you open a tag, you have to close it. So even for something like line break, where you don't necessarily have to have a closing tag because there's no contents in the middle, XML said, oh, yes, you do. You need a closing tag. So they came up with kind of a compromise, if you will, which was to create a class of tags that were self-closing, meaning they were both an opening and a closing tag. And this is how they did that. You might also see that when you deal with image tags, meta tags, all those tags in HTML that don't require a closing tag in XHTML are going to be formatted like this. There's no harm in doing it either way. If I save this and go back into the browser, you can see that it doesn't change the way that's visually formatted. It's simply another way to write that. We don't need to do that in HTML5 anymore. But honestly, if you do have that in the code, it's not going to hurt anything. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you use line breaks, they don't actually create a new section of content. So all this address is still within the same paragraph. You're just going to use them whenever you need to force a hard return without creating a new paragraph.